Okay, everybody, this is Joseph P. Farrell with News and Views on Thursday, February 19th, 2015. And the reason I'm smiling is because, in spite of the fact that this has been a week of really heavy geopolitical news, financial news, there's been more dead bankster suicides and their families. And now there are apparently links between all of these dying bankers and journalists as well, who are also seem to be starting to die under mysterious circumstances. There's so much going on, and I'm tempted to do my news and views about those stories, but the reason I'm smiling is I have to do my news and views about this story that appeared in the United Kingdom's Daily Mail on Monday, February 9th, would have been last week. And the reason I'm doing this is because last week I did a lot of blogs about space, and the space stories keep coming in and they keep getting weirder and weirder and weirder. For example, a lot of you last week talked to me and sent me articles about all of the sudden emphasis on aliens, sudden disclosure. There's a lot of speculation again, and you know me, I'm not on the disclosure bandwagon. This is a cycle that comes and goes and comes and goes, but they do appear to be pushing a lot of very weird space news. And this is one of the weirdest stories that I've seen in a long time, and it raises a lot of questions. And the story is headlined Neil Armstrong's Wife Finds Priceless Bag of Missing Space Equipment After 40 Years. And I'm going to read most of this story to you because when I read this, I had to reread it several times because the first time I read it, it was very unsettling. And the more I read it, it became more unsettling. Listen very closely. The bag full of power cables and utility clamps may not have looked very interesting when Carol Armstrong found them stuffed in a closet in her Ohio home. Yet the items, which had lain hidden for more than 4 decades, were actually priceless mementos from the most famous space mission of them all, during which her husband became the first person to walk on the moon. The so-called McDivitt purse contained objects carried in the Eagle lunar module during the historic Apollo 11 mission, and included the camera that filmed Neil Armstrong's descent onto the moon's surface on the 20th of July, 1969. The objects, which were supposed to be left on the moon so as not to add extra weight to their capsule launch on its launch off the lunar surface, will go on display at the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum alongside other artifacts from the mission. Experts said they were of priceless historical value. Now, skipping one paragraph, Mrs. Armstrong found the bag after her husband's death in 2012 and emailed the curators saying it contained assorted small items that looked like they may have come from a spacecraft. Among the 18 objects were cables, netting, mirrors, and the waist tether that Armstrong used. There was also the 16mm camera, which filmed the landing on the moon and the planting of the U.S. flag, alongside a bracket for the camera, a 10mm lens, and a lens shade. They were all put into the purse named after Apollo 9 commander Jim McDivitt, who first suggested taking a spare bag to temporarily carry items as there was no time to return them to storage. A picture still survives of the bag in Buzz Aldrin's hands. Mr. Needle said, as far as we know, Neil has never discussed the existence of these items, and no one else has seen them in the 45 years he returned from the moon. Armstrong had not mentioned the items to his biographer, James Hansen. And that's the article, with the exception of that one paragraph I left out. Now, if you're like me, there's a lot of red flags. There's a lot of alarm bells going off in this one. And the first is, how do you keep a bag full of spacecraft junk. Essentially, if there's a picture of some of this stuff in the article. How do you keep this hidden for almost 50 years? Are we to believe that Ms. Armstrong never went into this particular closet in that amount of time until 2012 and then pointed out, oh, look at all of this moon stuff, all right? So, in other words, I find that suspicious, number one. Number two, in the article, it's suggesting that the camera, the actual Hasselblad camera that was supposedly used on the moon, was part of all of this memorabilia. And that raises a question. Could there have been extra film in the camera or something else? Now, the third thing that I really am dubious about here is, why does it take so long to discover all of this stuff? And I suspect that one possible answer might be that whatever was found was not what he originally kept. In other words, he may have kept something else, and now we're getting the bait and switch. So, in other words, there may be missing film, there may be something he brought back from the moon, and it took 45 years to find. All right? And there's another aspect of this story I find very, very unsettling. And that is, why are we talking about this story, which occurred in 2012, only in 2015, and in the context of a lot of other stories that many of you have been following out there about space, asteroid mining? We've had FAA rulings and regulations on the moon since the turn of the year. We're seeing a new push for and new statements coming out from the Russians and so on about aliens and so on. There's that very curious statement that Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev in Russia made about the Russian security services having to tail a bunch of aliens that look like us that are living here on planet Earth. So, in other words, this story is coming in the context of a whole lot of other stories, and it's raising a lot of red flags. Why would you save a bunch of space junk, put it in a closet, never go into the closet, and then one of the things that you save is the camera, all right? And the key here is, these things were not supposed to be brought back. They were trying to save weight, all right? And that's kind of a little clue in my thinking that maybe the technology was somewhat different than they were letting on back then. So there's a lot of red flags here. But the bottom line for me, folks, in my high-octane speculation of the day, the bottom line for me is, the story's late in coming. The timing of it is very weird that they're pushing it now, almost 3 years after the fact, and that there appeared to be the possibility, the distinct possibility, that something here is either missing or it was switched out. Maybe there was film in that camera that has not been found. Maybe that was something else. But there's something going on here, and it's not settling. It's not sitting well with me that this story has taken that long to come out. Why would you save a bunch of junk and then forget to talk about it to your biographer? Never mention it to your wife. Your wife doesn't find it for 40 years. In other words, she's not cleaning house, or maybe he's got his own private closet that she's not allowed to go into. But even still, for 45 years, this is highly suspicious. So let me know your thoughts on this one. This is a strange story, folks, and I'm sorry. I know that there's a lot going on down here on Earth to talk about, the continuing escalation of tension between the United States and Russia over the Ukraine and other issues. But this one was so weird, I had to talk about it, because I think the space focus this year is going to be a major story. Now, one final note, I want to thank everybody for your prayers about the stolen vehicle. Um, we're still trying to get that resolved. I do want to thank you for that. I did hear very briefly a couple of days ago from George Ann Hughes' son, and he told me that she's up now in the evening. She's feeling better, so apparently she's up and awake and moving around in the evenings. So that's a bit of good news. Just wanted to pass that along to everybody. I understand that she's got some sort of Facebook page for those of you who follow or who are on Facebook. I think she's got some sort of page on Facebook now that does attempt to give a few updates from time to time. But anyway, I wanted to pass along that information. That's it for my very weird, high-octane speculation news and views from the Nefarium for Thursday, February 19th, 2015. I'm Joseph Farrell. Thanks a lot, everybody. I'll see you on the flip side, and God bless.